The reason you can't move on is not usually love. That's right. It's confusion. It's not being able to fully make sense of what happened. Most people don't get wrecked by the ending itself. They get wrecked trying to understand the contradiction. What's the contradiction? The silence, the mixed messages, the way somebody can seem close, seem sincere, seem like they mean it, and still leave you carrying all of the meaning alone. I'm Michael C. Murray. This is your Probably Right podcast. This episode is 333. Why mixed signals keep you stuck? And today, I want to slow this whole thing down and really look at it because mixed signals don't just waste your time. They distort your judgment. They keep you emotionally tied to a pattern that is already hurting you. And a lot of people stay stuck for way too long because they keep trying to understand the wrong part of the experience. They keep asking, what did this mean? When the better question is, what did this keep producing? That's what I want to get into because one of the deepest traps people fall into is confusion. Right. Confusing confusion with complexity. Yeah. Try that on. They think if it's hard to understand, it must mean something. It must mean more. If it's taking up this much space in my mind, in my head, there must be something unusually real there. If they're still thinking about it months later, right? It must be some rare kind of connection. But that's not always true. Sometimes what keeps you stuck isn't depth. It's simply instability. And those, my friend, are not the same thing. You see, depth eventually settles into something you can understand, even if it hurts. Instability keeps shifting just enough that your mind can't land anywhere. Kind of reminds me of the bird with the from Noah's Ark, if you know what I mean. And when your mind can't land anywhere, right? It keeps what? Going back. Not because the thing was so beautiful, but because it was never resolved. Stay with me. You see, that's what people miss. They think the experience is staying alive in their mind because it was so meaningful. Sometimes it's staying alive, right? Because it was incomplete, right? And incomplete things stick. Why? Because they're incomplete. People need closure. People want closure. Not because, right, they were better, because they never closed. It's just that simple. That's why mixed signals can get under your skin in a way a clean ending sometimes doesn't. You see, a clean no hurts. A clean rejection hurts. A clean ending hurts. Right? A clean no hurts. Sorry. Right? No. Right? Done. Okay. Okay. Well, they don't. Right? And then there's a clean rejection. Well, you know what? You're not my type. Bye. A clean ending hurts. Well, you know what? It's not you. It was me. And maybe I'm just not ready for commitment. Right? Again, that can hurt. It can sting, but it's fully, come to its fruition. But at least reality becomes reality, you see. Mixed signals don't do that, you see. Mixed signals leave you in this weird psychological in between where nothing ever fully ended and nothing ever fully became what it seemed like it was going to become in the first place. So your mind stays open, Your emotions stay open, your hope stays open. And because hope stays open, right, well, grief never gets to do its job. And that's a brutal, sad, horrible place to live. Because then you're not just hurt, you're in, or should I say, you're inter. How's the best way to say this? Well, let's just say you're interpretively trapped. Now you're trying to answer questions like, what was that? What did that mean? Why would they do that? What did that mean is a good question. And why would they do that? Only Lord knows. Why would they do all of that if they didn't mean it? Or why would they waste all that time, even their own time? Forget about your time. Why would they say that if they were going to act like this? Why would they move towards me like that and then disappear the second it requires some sort of steadiness? That kind of contradiction can keep intelligent people stuck for a very long time. Not because they're weak, because the mind hates incoherence. Human beings can tolerate pain better than they can tolerate nonsense. If somebody tells you no, it means no. It hurts, right? But eventually your system can process it. It says no. It's like you can't force somebody in a relationship with you. If somebody says yes in one moment, no in another, acts close in private, distant in public, warm when they want access or something, cold when you need clarity. Now your mind doesn't know what to do with any of it. So what do? You keep replaying it. You keep analyzing it. You keep reading messages. You keep watching videos. You keep looking at pictures. You keep replaying situations in your mind, a look you saw, a comment that was made. You keep trying to find the one explanation that will finally make the whole thing make sense. And a lot of time, that explanation never comes. Not because you're missing something deeper, though. You're not missing some deeper truth. Because the pattern itself was unstable. And that's the first thing people need to really understand, really. Sometimes the reason you're stuck isn't that the bond was profound. It's that the pattern never let your mind reach a conclusion. But before all the confusion, there was usually something that pulled you in. Yeah, I bet you know what it is. And that part really, really matters. Because people want to tell themselves they got stuck for no reason, like the whole thing was just random or that they just got too attached out of nowhere. Nah, let me sip this tea. That's not usually true. There was usually something specific that hooked them. Maybe it was simply attention. Maybe this person made you feel seen in a way you hadn't felt seen in a long time or ever. Maybe they noticed things about you. Maybe they were able to read your mind, it felt like. Maybe they spoke to a part of you that had been neglected and ignored for so long. Maybe they made you feel chosen. And if you'd been lonely or emotionally hungry or touch starved or just tired of feeling invisible, that can hit hard. Maybe it was chemistry. Maybe the physical side of it was strong enough that it overrode your caution. Maybe there was a sexual intensity there that made the whole thing feel more meaningful than it really was. That happens all the time. People don't want to admit how much chemistry can distort their actual judgment, but it can. It can make somebody seem deeper, more aligned, more emotionally important than they actually are. Maybe it was vulnerability. Maybe they told you things they don't tell other people. Maybe they opened up so quickly. Maybe they let you into some sort of private pain, something that you felt invested in, private fears, private stories, private struggles. And because of that, it felt like closeness. It felt like trust. It felt like you were building something real with someone real. Maybe it was timing. Maybe you'd been wanting closeness for a long time. Maybe you were finally open. Maybe you were tired of surface level nonsense and this person arrived at the exact moment when you were most ready to believe. And that matters too. Sometimes the hook isn't just who they were, it's the state you were in when they showed up. And sometimes it was the whole package: attention, right? Chemistry, intensity, personal disclosure, fast movement, constant contact, a kind of energy that made it feel like things were unfolding naturally and strongly, and maybe even unusually. Maybe you look back on texts and they said this and they said that, and they felt like they knew you for a long time and all kinds of stuff, and they let you into their life. Maybe they told you their kids' names and birthdays and what things they like to do and how the child was this, that, and the other, and how their ex is such and such, and all these different things that twist you into their life, seemingly. And that's what gets people. Because, you see, what hooked you in the beginning is often exactly what keeps you stuck later. Now, you're not just dealing with what happened or what's happening now, you're comparing it to how it started. You're thinking, it wasn't always like this. You're like, what happened to that person that I first met? They were so nice. They had all the time in the world to talk about seemingly surface level nonsense, but they made that surface level nonsense seem like the best conversation you ever had in your life. You're thinking, it wasn't always bad. You're remembering the version of them who showed up strong, responded quickly. Imagine that. Made space, made you feel wanted, made you feel special, made you feel like things were going to go somewhere. And now you're trying to get back to that. That's a huge part of the trap because you're not chasing something imaginary, right? You're chasing something that actually happened, at least for a while. And that's what makes it so convincing. People say just let it go. But that's easy to say when you weren't there for the part that made it feel real. When you weren't The one who got the messages, the calls, the confessions, the intimacy, the warmth, the sudden closeness, the future oriented talk, the emotional access, the physical access, the whatever form it took. If that beginning landed in a deep place for you, you're not going to dismiss that very easily. And to be fair, you shouldn't dismiss it completely. Sometimes the beginning was real. That's another thing people oversimplify. Sometimes the beginning was sincere. Sometimes they did mean what they were saying in the moment. Sometimes they did feel what they were expressing in the moment. The problem is not always that the beginning was fake. The problem is that it wasn't sustainable. And at some point, something probably changed their mind. And sad to say, some people are not very upfront. Some people don't have the guts, as some would say, or other things they don't have, to just be straightforward and say, you know what, something's off. I thought it was this, but no, I think it's that. Who knows? Maybe it was a person, maybe it was an ex, maybe something interfered in what you were, doing. It's how they show up when things are easy, not when things require steadiness, not when choices have to be made, not when there's pressure, not when there's, you know, all kinds of consequences, not when the relationship has to move from feeling to structure. And that's where a lot of people get lost. They assume the beginning must tell them who the person really is. But at the beginning, you can't say that because, there's that huge, for some people, honeymoon phase, right? The beginning usually tells you how someone can show up under ideal conditions, but we know in relationships and life, ideal conditions don't last forever, or you never know when that's going to be or for how long. The pattern tells you what they can actually maintain. That's the difference. And if you don't make that distinction, you'll spend way too long trying to recover a version of someone that only existed when there was no real demand on them at all. Then that next part kicks in, the intensity. This is where people really get fooled because mixed signals don't just confuse you, they activate you. And activation feels important. It feels deep. It feels charged. It feels like something meaningful is happening. But meaningful and activated or activating are not the same thing. When somebody is clear, stable, emotionally available, and consistent, your system actually gets calmer. You can still be attracted, you can still be excited, you can still be fascinated by them, but there's less scrambling, less decoding, less preoccupation, less obsession with every little shift in tone. With mixed signals, it's the opposite. Your attention gets hijacked. Now you're watching closely. How long did they take to reply? It's been 4 hours. It's been half a day. It's been a whole day. What did that message really mean? Start reading between the lines. Why were they warm last night and distant today? The question that nobody can answer. Why did they like that story but ignore the text? They came around the same time. Why did they like that story exactly? And why did they ignore that text? Who knows? But stuff like that, you'll start reading into, right? When things aren't right, you have more time on your hand to try to figure things out. Why did they open up and then all of a sudden detach or act detached? Why were they so affectionate in private and so flat in public or around a certain person? And now all these tiny moments start feeling bigger and bigger than they actually are. A delayed response feels loaded. A slight change in tone feels loaded. Maybe they could have extended an invitation somewhere that you'd normally go or a place that they like to go, but they don't want you to go with them there. A warm look feels loaded. A sudden reappearance feels loaded. Everything starts carrying too much meaning because the whole thing feels unstable and your mind is trying so hard to stabilize it. That creates emotional spikes. Up when they show up and down when they disappear. Up when they say something that sounds so sincere, down when their behavior doesn't match. Up when you think maybe this is finally becoming something, down when you realize you're back in the same uncertainty all over again. That's the cycle. Yeah, that cycle creates intensity. But intensity is not the same thing as trust. It's not the same as love. I know we'd like to fool ourselves sometimes, but it's not the same. It's not the same as compatibility. A lot of the time, it's just simply inconsistency plus hope. Sometimes that gives you butterflies. And that combination is so powerful because when tension builds, right, relief feels huge. So now a small gesture lands like a major event. Oh, he bought me the favorite bag of chips that I like. Oh, she rubbed my back as I was working. A text back feels enormous. A good conversation feels enormous. A tender moment, like a back rub, feels almost sacred. Like, oh, I am chosen. Oh, I am special. Not necessarily because it's that deep, but because your nervous system has been starved for clarity, and any temporary relief feels bigger than it actually is. That's how people get attached to cycles. Not just the person, the cycle, the anticipation, the uncertainty, the relief, the drop, the reactivation, the temporary reassurance, the sudden confusion again. It starts training you, actually. You begin linking emotional volatility with significance. And if if you've got unmet needs underneath all of this, if you've been lonely, right, longing for closeness, needing to be chosen, craving a certain kind of attention, craving sex, craving a wonderful looking person, craving validation, craving emotional partnership, craving someone who can actually flip and pay the bill at a restaurant and who drives a car that is not going to break down by chance, someone who owns their own home, craving proof that what you want is still possible. Then this kind of intermittent pattern can hit even harder because there's something there for you that you thought was there, but it's not for you really. Because it doesn't touch your feelings, see? It hooks into your hunger for something. And once it hooks into your hunger, now the person starts to feel bigger than they are, more wonderful than they are, better looking than they are, nicer than they are. Now they're not just a person, they're a possibility, a solution, a symbol, evidence that maybe what you've wanted for a long time is finally here. And, my friend, that's why people stay. Not because the situation is healthy, because it keeps brushing against something they deeply want. Yeah, maybe literally. And when that happens, even crumbs can feel important. That's the next thing people have to understand. You see, warm moments are not the same thing as reliable patterns. And this is where a lot of otherwise smart people get stuck for months or years. They keep going back to moments that you had. You might even, at some level, reject a new connection because this old connection had these fire firecracker moments, these 4th of July moments. Maybe it was 4th of July. But they have these moments in your memory that's like, man, well, this new thing is good, but it's not that. Yeah. The conversations were everything, felt honest. Yeah, you had those conversations where everything just seemed so easy and clear. That night that felt unusually intimate. That look, that look seemed loaded with meaning and almost like they peered into your very soul. That private vulnerability. Maybe they cried on your shoulder and they don't usually cry. That physical experience. That stretch of time where it felt easy, mutual, clear, and absolutely amazing. And because those moments were real to them, they keep giving those moments more authority than the overall pattern actually deserves. But a moment, hear me, a moment or a few moments are not a relationship. The pattern is the relationship. Anybody can produce a moment or two. Anybody can be sincere for an evening, assisted or not, with something. Anybody can be emotionally available when they're lonely, horny, dysregulated, seeking comfort, craving validation, wanting some sort of an ego repair, needing distraction, or just caught up in the energy of the moment. That doesn't tell you what they can build. It tells you what they can feel or perform under certain and sometimes perfect conditions. Those are not the same thing. And your life is not built on moments, no matter what Will Smith and Hitch told you. It's built on patterns. That's why this matters so much. If the repeated outcome is confusion, that's right, if the repeated outcome is confusion, waiting, anxiety, doubt, secrecy, why is that phone flipped over? Unfinished conversations, or how about the conversations that switch topics when you think you're going to get into something? Emotionally dependence and mental obsession, ruminating, then that is what the relationship is producing. No matter how strong the best moments felt, you cannot build a future on exceptions. You build a future on the dominant pattern. Now, I know it hit you hard. I started off hard. But honestly, this podcast, guys, is to keep things real. And I got a lot more to say, but I just wanted to break it up for a second. One thing I wanted to say to you guys, as you know, this podcast is for entertainment purposes only. I don't profess to be a professor of anything, except those who know me know that I'm a professing Christian. And sometimes I'll veer off into that land, as I should, but sometimes it's just me having my own thoughts. And this is where we are here today. Not that my thoughts aren't different in some way, being a Christian, but sometimes I have to go through these things. Some of these things, most of the episodes that I talk about are things that I've actually experienced, things that I've lived, things that I know to a deep level, including this one. So as I said, all of this is hard to accept. So I'm there with you. I feel your pain. Because accepting it means admitting, right, that what moved you most may not actually be what had the most structural truth. But that's often the reality. The best moments are what kept you there. And that's understandable because those moments were probably pretty amazing. The repeated pattern is what tells you what it really was. Yeah. If you're in the relationship and then it fills, it just pops and kind of fizzles away, and this look that they used to have fades, almost like a dead look. And you're wondering, okay, where's that other person? Same face. But why? A lot of people reverse the patterns, though. They treat the beautiful moments like the truth and the instability like the noise. In a lot of cases, it's honestly the other way around. The beautiful moments are what made it persuasive. The repeated instability is what made it actually real. And that's one of the hardest pills to swallow in this conversation. Because once you let that in, right, you can't keep asking, but what about that night? What about that week? What about that vacation? What about that conversation? What about that experience? What about how they looked at me? About what they said? What about how close it felt? Listen, you can still honor those things because they happened and they were real, but you stop letting them outrank the repeated outcome. You're alone. You didn't get clarity. You're confused. They're not here. You're here. Right. And that's where clarity actually starts, friends. Another piece people don't want to say out loud is this: sometimes ambiguity benefits the other person. That's why it doesn't get cleaned up. Listen, if somebody is getting what they want without having to define anything, without having to commit to anything, why buy the milk when you're getting the cow for free? They are often under much less pressure than the person who actually wants clarity. They may be getting access without accountability. They may be getting validation without commitment. They may be getting emotional intimacy while still preserving their options. They may be getting sex, attention, care, softness, money, support, loyalty, admiration, or the comfort of being wanted without having to fully stand inside what they are creating. So while you're sitting there suffering because the uncertainty is eating your mind, they may be relatively comfortable sitting back with their arms crossed and their feet crossed because the uncertainty is actually serving them exactly what they want: stress free. That's why one of the biggest mistakes people make is assuming the confusion must be bothering the other person as much as it's bothering you. Nope. To tell you the truth, you asking for clarity, looking for where everything is going, is what actually stresses them out. So, and what they ended up doing, or what they end up doing, is causing distance because they don't want that stress. They don't want that pressure. If the blur lets them keep the benefits without the burden, right? The blur is working. If the vagueness gives them room to retreat whenever responsibility shows up, guess what? The vagueness is working for them. If they can be warm when they want closeness and disappear when you want clarity and still keep you emotionally available, then from their side, right, that ambiguity may be extremely functional. That doesn't always mean there's some evil mastermind, but sometimes they are. Sometimes it's avoidance. Sometimes it's selfishness. Sometimes it's immaturity. Sometimes it's self centeredness with the selfishness. Sometimes it's internal conflict. Sometimes it's cowardice, as I was saying earlier. Sometimes it's somebody who likes what they're getting and does not want to give what it would cost to make the situation honest. Sometimes an old flame shows up in their life, or sometimes an old flame just has their heart and they can't commit to you. And you think, oh, well, if I just give them this thing, if I just act this certain way, then maybe I can be that piece for them. Listen, whatever the explanation is, the effect on you can be severe. You're here, aren't you? Because the same ambiguity that keeps you hopeful in real time often becomes the cover story later. Now, they can say we were never really together. Now they can say you took it more seriously than I did. Now they can minimize everything because nothing was clearly defined, right? Enough to hold them accountable. That's the part of why this can feel so violating. The blur hurts you while you're in it, then protects them after it's over, right? You see a big blur, there's cloudiness in front of you, so you can't really see what things are. Maybe it's fog in the morning. Think about a morning drive or wherever, and it's foggy and you can barely see whatever that thing is down the road where you can normally see it, but now you can't see it because it's foggy. And sometimes, even a worse layer, sometimes you still have to see them. Yeah, sometimes you have to see them regularly. Same social circle, maybe, same workplace that you both spend 8 to 8.5 hours a day, same neighborhood, same condo building, same gym, same friend group, same spiritual community, same online space, same event, whatever it is. Sorry, guys. Listen, all those things add a whole different level of distortion. Maybe somehow you share a child. Maybe. Because now the thing doesn't just live in your head, it keeps showing up in your environment. You had real conversations with this person, real private moments, real emotional or physical closeness. Maybe it moved very fast. Maybe you admitted things. Maybe it was just that easy. Maybe they admitted things. Maybe maybe you have the texts still. Maybe you thought about erasing them, but then you thought you won't have any proof that it really happened because it's just turned into what it is now. Maybe you have pictures. Maybe you have videos. Maybe you have memories that are concrete enough that you know you didn't imagine this. Maybe you're thinking of destroying them. I can't tell you what to do with them. You got to figure that out for yourself. And now, listen, you see them acting like none of it ever happened. How about that? And that is a special kind of mind meld. I was going to say something else, but you know what I'm trying to say. Because you're holding one reality and then they're performing another one. You know what was said, you saw the tears, you saw the hurt, the pains, whatever it is that was displayed. You know what happened. You know the level of access that you gave. Maybe they met your children. Maybe your kids ask for them now. And now you're watching them flatten it in real time. Sometimes they're weirdly casual with you in public, like they're trying to make it small. Sometimes they avoid you, avoid looking at you, going away in the building or wherever it is to avoid you, and you catch them because you had to go a different way. You're like, huh, why are they over here all of a sudden? Maybe you catch them hiding around the place from you, just inadvertently. Not that you were searching for them. It's like, oh, why are you in this office all of a sudden? Sometimes they're overcompensating and acting too normal. Sometimes they become colder in front of other people, and you can sense they've probably said something. They're way colder than they ever were in private. Sometimes the whole thing was so hidden that nobody else knows anything that happened. So, from the outside looking in, you're reacting to absolutely nothing. And what does that do? That makes you feel crazy. You feel like trapped in the twilight zone. You feel like you're locked in a box that's clear. Everybody can see you in this box, and they don't know why you're in the box because there's nothing there seemingly, but there is something that nobody else knows. Especially if the connection got deep quickly and then got buried quickly. Especially if you were under the impression that what was happening mattered, only to realize later that it was a lot of wasted time, a lot more hidden than you thought. That hurts. Because now it's not just that the person pulled away, it's that the whole experience starts to feel like it's being erased in front of your face. And if you're the one who wanted closeness for a long time, if you really believed you'd finally found it, that kind of erasure can hit so hard. And honestly, if you're listening here and this has happened to you, I feel your pain and I understand what you're going through. Maybe not obviously fully, because we all have our specific situations and things that are just us in our life. But I can tell you that you're listening to somebody who's been through something like what you've been through in some way. I know those situations can hit hard, right? Because it makes you question not just them, but your own read on reality. Because, like, how did I get sucked into this? You might have thought. Or they're not even that good looking. Or they're not even that successful. Or, you know what I mean? They're funny, but they're not that funny. They're eligible, but not that eligible. Like, you can pick apart it in moments that you're honest, but something still draws you back. How can somebody share all of that with you and then act like you're just some random person they used to know? Somebody that I used to know. Ah, how can somebody cross those lines with you and then move through the world like there's nothing to account for? How can somebody help create that level of attachment and then behave like you're overreacting for carrying the consequences of it? That's where a lot of people get stuck. They're not just grieving the loss, they're trying to reconcile the public behavior with the private reality. And when those things don't match, the mind starts to scramble again. Another reason people get trapped is because they're trying to be fair. They're trying to be respectful. This part matters because I don't want people turning this into some simple story where they call themselves stupid and the other person a monster. Because who knows what can come out of all that. A lot of people got stuck because they were trying to be humane. They were trying to be the bigger person. They were trying to turn the other cheek. They were trying to make room for complexity. They were trying not to be, well, they're trying not to reduce the other person too quickly, just in case. They were thinking, maybe this person's scared. Oh, you shoot them some bail. Maybe they've been hurt. Maybe the timing is bad. Maybe they were broken. Or maybe they are broken. Maybe they're emotionally immature. Maybe they're overwhelmed. Maybe they do care and just don't know how to show it properly. Maybe I need to be more patient. Maybe I'm expecting too much too fast. You see, that kind of thinking can sound mature, right? But sometimes, well, sometimes it is mature, but it becomes dangerous when it's not paired with boundaries around your life. Because while you're trying to account for their complexities, right? You're being nice, shooting them some bail. Listen, the pattern is still costing you, though. You're staying open. They got you open like 7-Eleven, some would say. Maybe you've done all kinds of things that any normal, regular person who didn't feel the connection would say, "What are you doing?" And maybe now you've done so much for that person that it's embarrassing. Maybe you've given them boatloads of money. Maybe you gave them your mother's wedding ring or something, or your grandma's wedding ring. Maybe you bought them a car. Maybe you took them on a trip. Maybe you loaned them your car and you don't even know how to get it back. Obviously, these are extreme, but some people have done this. You know, you're staying available just in case. So you're not even moving on with your life. You're staying interpretive. You're giving more context, more grace, more benefit of the doubt, more internal defense, more explanations, more time than the situation has actually earned. And eventually, there comes a point where being fair to them becomes unfair to you. And that's the line people miss. Understanding is not the problem. There comes a point where refusal to call the pattern what it is stops being compassion and starts being avoidance. Because if you really let the simpler explanation in, then you'd actually have to grieve. You'd have to face the possibility that what felt meaningful to you was never going to become stable enough to build on. You have to let go of the fantasy that one more conversation, one more sign, one more week, one more chance, one more moment of tenderness will finally pull the truth into the open. That's hard. So people stay in analysis, trying to figure it out. Because the simple fact that analysis is easier than grief. They keep trying to understand because understanding gives hope. more time to survive. But hope can become a trap, right? When it's disconnected from the pattern. And then the damage gets even deeper because mixed signals don't just waste your time, they train you to distrust your own perception. This is one of the biggest costs, and people don't talk about it enough. When you live in confusion too long, you start overriding yourself. You notice something's off, then talk yourself out of noticing it. You feel disrespected, then tell yourself, maybe you're being too sensitive. Or maybe they told you're being too sensitive. And maybe you figure, oh, they were right all along. I was too sensitive. You see the same pattern happening again, then soften your conclusion because you want to be kind or because you're scared of being wrong. You keep getting evidence, but you keep waiting for a nicer explanation to outrank it. That does something corrosive. You stop trusting your own read. You stop believing what you feel and observe. And observe, well, you feel and you observe, but is it enough to make a decision? Should be. You start thinking you need some impossible level of proof before you allow yourself to protect yourself. You don't. You do not need to fully diagnose the other person before you set a boundary. You do not need complete access to their inner world to know exactly what's going on behind the scenes of stuff that you don't know about before you decide that the impact on your life is way too high. You don't need to know whether they're avoidant. No, you don't. Selfish, ashamed, manipulative, conflicted, wounded, scared, immature, or just not that invested. That may all be interesting. It may even be true, but it's not required to protect yourself. What matters, really, is the impact it's had. What is this pattern doing to you, to your bank account, to your life, to your family, to your kids, to your job? What are you becoming on the inside? Are you becoming anxious, more distracted, more preoccupied, doing things around that situation, trying to set up your life in a way that will be nice to them so that they'll come back? Are you more willing to shrink yourself, more willing to accept those crumbs, more likely to call inconsistency chemistry, more likely to call vagueness depth, more likely to keep paying for access with your peace, with your pocket? That's the real issue because that's what mixed signals often do. They erode self-trust. They make people second guess their instincts. They make people believe clear perception is harsh and endless interpretation is maturity. It isn't. Sometimes the most mature thing you can do is say, I don't fully understand you, but I understand what this is doing to me. And that is enough. That's a powerful shift, really. You see, it moves you out of trying to solve them and back into observing the effect of the situation on your own life. And that's where the way out starts. You see, the way out starts, the way out is more, it's more analysis of warm moments. Sorry, the way out is not more analysis of warm moments. Imagine after all that, no, it's not. It's crazy. It's different. Way out is not more analysis. It's proper weighing of the pattern. You stop asking, what did that moment mean? You start asking, what did that relationship keep producing? You stop asking whether they ever cared, because that question right there, did they ever care? Did they ever love me? Honestly, I bet if you look back at the experiences you had, it was more than just a fumble. It was more than just a blip, a mistake. You start asking whether the kind of care they had was steady enough, honest enough, mature enough, integrated enough to build actually anything real at all. Because someone can care, right? And still be unsafe. It's just that simple. Someone can feel something and still be inconsistent. Someone can mean part of what they say and still create an emotional environment that is not healthy to live in for you. Those are hard truths, but they matter. A lot of people stay trapped because they keep asking, was any of it real? And that's not the most useful question. Maybe some of it was real. Maybe some of it was sincere. Maybe some of it mattered. But listen, partial reality is not enough if the repeated outcome is still confusion and damage for you. Fragmented sincerity is not enough. It's not. Trust me, it's not enough. Private tenderness? Nah, not enough. Attraction? It's not enough. Chemistry? It's not enough. Roller coaster highs and lows? It's not enough. A few honest moments are not enough. Not if the dominant pattern keeps producing instability, vagueness, causing you to be dysregulated and acting in ways that you know are not you. At some point, you have to let the repeated outcomes outrank your favorite interpretation. And that's the difference. You let the pattern tell you what the relationship really is, because that is the evidence. That is the data that you need. You just need to step back and look at the whole picture. Look at the whole existence. Look at all of the texts. The time when they said, well, maybe we should leave it there. Maybe I'm not right for you. Maybe I'm gonna hurt you. I know you love me, but I'm broken. All of those are them pretty much telling on themselves. They just didn't have the guts to say it in a straightforward way. Because why? You offered something to them that they wanted, something that they possibly even needed. Maybe you were just bridging a gap. Maybe you were a shoulder to lie on. Maybe you were actually a rebound. You let that pattern tell you what the relationship was. That's what you need to do. Not the promise, not the almost of hope, not the fantasy of who they might have been. If they were more healed, more honest, more emotionally adult, more decisive, more available, if they weren't raised by those people, they weren't in that religion, the pattern. Because the pattern is the relationship. What happens? What happened for real? All of it, not just cherry picking the amazing moments. That line matters. The pattern is the relationship, not the exception, not the chemistry, not the best moments, not the version of them you keep hoping will come back. The pattern. Once you really let that in, a lot of energy starts coming back to you. Now you stop begging them to explain their inconsistencies better than their behavior already has. Now you stop presenting evidence of meaning to somebody who benefits from minimizing meaning. Now you stop trying to pull a clean verdict out of someone who has every incentive, every incentive to stay vague. Now you stop asking moments of you stop asking moments to overrule the patterns that you've seen. And that's where, something called dignity, right? That's where it starts to return. Maybe you're embarrassed. Listen, dignity doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes dignity is just quiet. Sometimes dignity is simply refusing to keep arguing with reality. Sometimes dignity is saying, this may have mattered, but it is not stable enough for me to keep living inside of the consequences of it. That's enough. There might not be closure. Maybe that is your closure. You don't need the perfect explanation. You're probably not going to get it. Even if you leave a 20-minute voice message or a 15-paragraph text, you don't need them to admit everything. They don't need to hear you sobbing on a message. They don't need to see your sad face. It's not going to help. You think pity's going to bring you back in a relationship? It's pointless. You don't need to make or hear a final speech that ties the whole thing together in a nice, neat bow. You need to stop paying for access with your peace. That's really what a lot of these situations come down to. Sadly, I know, but I'm just being real with you. You're paying in overthinking, you're paying in sleeplessness, right? I know. You're paying in preoccupation, you're paying in lowered self respect, you're paying in delayed grief, you're paying in attention, you're paying in time, you're paying in your relationship with your own perception. And the whole thing keeps going because some part of you is still hoping that if you understand enough, maybe you'll finally be able to make sense of the whole thing. But you can't think your way out of somebody else's unwillingness to be clear. You can't stay soft enough to make an inconsistent person become coherent. You can't love your way through ambiguity. You can't decode your way into safety. That has to come from them, and you can't force them. And if it doesn't come from them, then the work becomes yours. Not to explain them forever, to stop abandoning yourself in the name of understanding them. And that's the real pivot, because sometimes the deepest heartbreak is not that they were confusing. It's not that you kept giving their confusion more dignity than it deserved. You kept assuming there had to be some profound hidden reason. You just need to hit the right buttons for the inconsistency or of the inconsistency situation. You kept assuming the blur meant complexity instead of avoidance, divided desire, selfishness, immaturity, convenience, or simple lack of integrity. You kept trying to interpret your way into a cleaner reality than the pattern was actually ever producing. And eventually, what does that get? Exhausting, right? You're tired because the pattern keeps saying one thing and your hope keeps trying to say something else. But life gets quieter when you stop waiting for inconsistent people to narrate the truth. Life gets quieter when you stop treating moments like they have more authority than repeated outcomes. Life gets quieter when you stop calling something deep just because it was emotionally activating. And life gets better when you finally admit that some of the most damaging connections are not the ones with the strongest foundations. They're the ones with just enough warmth to hook you and just enough ambiguity to keep you doubting yourself and guessing. And that is the trap. And seeing the trap is the beginning of you getting free because you can step out of it. So, why do mixed signals keep people stuck? Because they let hope survive without giving trust a place to stand. Because they create intensity without offering safety. Because they fill the mind with interpretation while starving the heart of certainty. Because they make the warm moments feel truer than the repeated outcomes. Because they often benefit the person who's least motivated, least invested to clear them up. Because they can turn a decent person's fairness into a mechanism of self betrayal. And because if you stay too long, they don't just take your time. They take all your clarity. They take all your self-trust. They take your ability to believe what your own eyes and nervous system have been trying and trying and trying to tell you. Even maybe your friends or your mom or your dad, your sister, your brother, your coworker, your minister, your neighbor. And eventually, the shift's actually really simple. You stop asking whether they meant it, and you start asking what the pattern cost you. You stop asking whether there was something real, and you start asking whether what was real was enough to build on. You stop waiting for them to finally make it all make sense, and you start letting the pattern tell you the truth. Sometimes what keeps a person attached is not the strength of the bond. It's the unfinished feeling of it. It's the almost. It's the beginning that felt real. It's the private moments that seemed to promise a future the pattern never actually supported. It's the hope that one day the other person will finally say plainly, what you spent all that time trying to prove through fragments. But you can't build your life on fragments, and you can't keep calling it depth when what it really was producing is confusion. At some point, the cleanest thing you can say is this: they were not clear enough, stable enough, honest enough, or integrated enough for me to keep living inside the consequences of their ambiguity. And my friend, that is enough. Now, I understand it doesn't solve the mystery, but it tells you the truth that you need, and that's why I'm here. I don't say these things to make you feel bad. I don't say these things to make you cry. I say these things because I've been there, I've done that. Repeat, rinse, repeat. And I'm here and I'm trying to be with you through this in these podcast episodes just like this one, trying to let you understand. Sometimes what freedom actually looks like is not getting every answer, just finally believing the pattern that is right before you. Anyways, y'all, this has been another episode of You're Probably Right. I really appreciate your support in any way, shape, or form that you can give it. And until next time, this is Michael C. Murray signing off for You're Probably Right. Take care and see you again, okay? Take care. Bye-bye. Hey, come check out You're Probably Right podcast. Society is getting more unpredictable every day, but at the same time, predictable in its unpredictability. Say that 4 times real fast. Come with me as I attempt to find clarity in all the fog while staying way outside the box and kicking the box way down the road with my size 12 ducks. I use the Bible, experience, education, fortune, misfortune, life's lessons, life's mistakes to sort through all the mess. I talk about news, God, God, self-help, sports, sickness, health, music, parenting, love, humbleness, hurt, pain, joy, and all the things that might make you say, I never thought of it that way. Hopefully, anyway. Also, I take a stab at answering tough and not so tough questions. And all the while, understand that, listen, sometimes you end up in the hot seat and there's no thermostat. Well, that's how it is here. And because there's no topic, well, very few topics off the table, Torontonians will understand that Doug Ford reference there. Hopefully the podcast will be helpful and uplifting. And hey, maybe you'll find your own private Idaho here somewhere. Hope to see you soon.